The soft glow of morning crept through the window as Amelia Kincade awakened with a start, the remnants of her dream still clinging to her consciousness like morning dew. Her heart raced as she tried to grasp the fading images, a man falling from a great height, her own hands reaching out to save him, and an overwhelming sense of destiny. Such nonsense, she thought, shaking her head to clear it. 22 years of life had taught her that dreams were merely the mind's frivolous entertainment, not portents of things to come. London, 1842. The city bustled outside her modest bedchamber, but within these walls, Amelia was sheltered from both its promises and its cruelties. Rising from her bed, she moved to the wash basin and splashed cool water on her face. Her reflection stared back, amber eyes set in a heart-shaped face, framed by chestnut curls that refused to be tamed. Her grandmother had once called her pretty, but Amelia knew better. Pretty was for girls with dowries and connections, not for the daughter of a disgraced merchant who had lost everything to gambling debts before drowning himself in the Thames. "You are late again, Miss Kincade," came the sharp voice of Mrs. Winters as Amelia hurried down to the small parlour where she taught the 3 daughters of the household. "My girls have been waiting these 10 minutes past." "Forgive me, Mrs. Winters," Amelia replied with a small curtsy. "It shall not happen again." The woman's lips thinned to a line of disapproval. "See that it doesn't. A governess without punctuality is hardly worth her salt. You're fortunate we took you in, considering your circumstances." Her circumstances, the polite phrase for the scandal that had followed her father's suicide 6 years ago, the whispers that still trailed behind her like shadows. Amelia had long ago accepted that her life would be one of service and solitude. Love and marriage were luxuries afforded to those untainted by disgrace. Her path was clear: work diligently, save what meager wages she could, and perhaps one day open a small school of her own. That was the extent of what someone like her could hope for. As she guided young Sophia Winters through her French conjugations, Amelia silenced the small voice within that sometimes dared to dream of more. Dreams were dangerous things that only led to disappointment. "Miss Kincade, might we have our lesson in the park today?" asked little Emma, the youngest of the Winters girls. "It's ever so lovely outside." Amelia hesitated. "I'm not certain your mother would approve." "Oh, but she said we might, if you agreed to it," insisted Jane, the eldest at 12. "She's gone to call on Lady Pembroke and won't return until late afternoon." The prospect of fresh air was too tempting to resist. "Very well, then. Gather your books and bonnets, girls." Hyde Park was indeed splendid that day, the late spring sunshine casting dappled light through the trees. They found a quiet spot beneath an ancient oak, and Amelia spread a blanket for their improvised classroom. As the girls recited their poetry, Amelia allowed herself a moment of contentment. If her life could not be grand, at least it could contain these small pleasures. Their peace was shattered by the thundering of hooves. Amelia looked up to see a magnificent black stallion careening down the path, its rider slumped precariously in the saddle. Without thinking, she leapt to her feet. "Stay here," she commanded the girls, gathering her skirts and rushing toward the path. The horse was bearing down fast, its eyes wild with fear. The rider, a gentleman by his fine clothes, appeared unconscious, his tall frame threatening to slip from the saddle at any moment. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. The scene was eerily familiar, reminiscent of her morning dream, but she pushed the thought aside. This was no time for fanciful notions. Positioning herself at a bend in the path, Amelia calculated her timing. As the horse approached, she stepped forward, her voice low and steady. "Whoa there, easy now." The stallion's ears flicked toward her. She continued to murmur soothingly, reaching out as the animal slowed, drawn to the calm in her voice. With one hand, she grasped the reins, and with the other, she steadied the unconscious man before he could fall. "Help," she called to a nearby gardener. "This man needs assistance." Together, they managed to ease the gentleman from the saddle onto the grass. He was a striking figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with features that even in unconsciousness conveyed strength and nobility. Blood trickled from a wound at his temple. "He's been shot," the gardener exclaimed, pointing to the tear in the man's riding coat where a bullet had grazed his side. "Send for a doctor," Amelia instructed, tearing a strip from her petticoat to press against the head wound. As she ministered to him, his eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes of such a startling blue that Amelia felt a jolt of recognition, though she was certain they had never met. "Am I dead?" he murmured, his gaze fixing on her face with bewildered intensity. "No, sir, you've been injured, but help is coming." A faint smile crossed his lips before he slipped back into unconsciousness. Amelia remained at his side until a carriage bearing a ducal crest arrived, and several livered servants rushed to attend to him. "The Duke of Valmont must be taken home at once," ordered an austere gentleman who introduced himself as the Duke's secretary. "You have our deepest gratitude, Miss Kincade, Amelia Kincade." "Miss Kincade, His Grace will wish to thank you personally when he recovers." Amelia shook her head. "That won't be necessary. I only did what anyone would do." But as the Duke was carefully placed in the carriage, Amelia could not shake the strange feeling that had settled over her. The dream, the rescue, it was as if fate had orchestrated their meeting. Nonsense, she chided herself again. A governess had no business entertaining such thoughts about a duke. Their worlds were as separate as earth and sky. Yet when she returned to the Winters household that evening, she found herself unable to banish the image of those piercing blue eyes from her mind. 2 days later, Amelia was summoned to the parlor where an unexpected visitor awaited. The same secretary she had met in the park stood formally by the fireplace, his expression inscrutable. "Miss Kincade, His Grace the Duke of Valmont requests the pleasure of your company for tea tomorrow, as a gesture of his gratitude for your heroic actions." Mrs. Winters, who hovered nearby, gasped audibly, "The Duke of Valmont wishes to see our governess." "Indeed, madam, His Grace is most insistent." Amelia felt her cheeks grow warm. "Please convey my appreciation to His Grace, but I must decline. It would be most improper." The secretary's eyebrow arched slightly. "His Grace anticipated your reluctance and instructed me to inform you that Lady Harrington, his aunt, will be present as chaperone. A carriage will collect you at 2 o'clock." With that, he bowed and departed, leaving Amelia to face Mrs. Winter's incredulous stare. "You will accept, of course," her employer stated, her tone making it clear this was not a suggestion. "Such an honor cannot be refused, and who knows, perhaps His Grace might be persuaded to sponsor the girls, coming out when the time arrives." Amelia nodded mutely, knowing she had no choice. Yet as she climbed the stairs to her room, a sense of foreboding settled over her. Nothing good could come from stepping beyond the boundaries of her station, even for an afternoon. Valmont House stood like a palace among the grand residences of Mayfair, its imposing facade a testament to generations of wealth and power. As Amelia was escorted through its marbled halls, she felt increasingly out of place in her best, but still modest, blue muslin dress. In a sun-drenched drawing-room overlooking manicured gardens, the Duke awaited. He rose as she entered, and Amelia was struck by his imposing presence. Tall and commanding, with raven-black hair and those remarkable blue eyes she remembered, Vincent Xavier, the 7th Duke of Valmont, embodied the aristocratic ideal. A bandage was visible at his temple, and he moved with a slight stiffness that betrayed his recent injuries. "Miss Kincade," he said, his deep voice resonant in the spacious room. "At last, I can properly thank the angel who saved my life." Beside him sat an elegant older woman who regarded Amelia with curious scrutiny. "My aunt, Lady Harrington," the Duke introduced. Amelia curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, Lady Harrington, you are too kind. I assure you, what I did warrants no such attention." "On the contrary, the Duke replied, gesturing for her to sit. "If not for your quick thinking, I would likely have perished. My physician says the fall from the horse would have been fatal in my condition." As tea was served by silent footmen, the Duke inquired about her position with the Winters family and her background. Amelia answered carefully, revealing nothing of her father's disgrace. "And you are from Derbyshire originally?" he asked. "Yes, your grace. My father was a merchant there." "Was? He passed some years ago." The Duke's penetrating gaze suggested he knew there was more to the story, but he did not press. Instead, he turned the conversation to books, and Amelia found herself drawn into a surprising debate about the merits of the latest Dickens serial. "You have an uncommonly sharp mind, Miss Kincade," he remarked, a glint of admiration in his eyes. "For a governess, you mean?" Amelia replied, instantly regretting her boldness. To her surprise, the Duke laughed. "For anyone. Few people of my acquaintance can argue so persuasively for the social conscience of literature." Lady Harrington, who had been observing their exchange with interest, interjected, "My nephew has always valued intellect over convention. It's made him quite the eligible bachelor, in spite of his stubborn refusal to follow society's expectations." "Aunt Elizabeth," the Duke warned, though his tone remained light. As the afternoon drew to a close, Amelia found herself reluctant to leave. There was something compelling about Vincent Xavier, not merely his title or his undeniable handsomeness, but a quality of authentic engagement that she had rarely encountered. "Miss Kincade," he said as she prepared to depart, "I find myself indebted to you still. Would you permit me to call upon you again?" Amelia's heart fluttered traitorously, but her reason prevailed. "Your Grace, while I am honored, I think it best we consider your debt paid in full. Our worlds are very different, and I have my position to consider." A shadow crossed his face. "As you wish. But should you ever require assistance of any kind, you need only send word." He pressed a card into her hand, his fingers lingering against hers for a moment longer than propriety allowed. Amelia curtsied one final time and fled to the waiting carriage, her composure threatening to crumble beneath the weight of emotions she dared not name. For the next fortnight, Amelia tried to forget the Duke of Valmont and return to the predictable rhythm of her life. She had done the right thing, the only sensible thing, in refusing further connection. Yet she found herself watching the street whenever she took the girls for their walks, half hoping to glimpse his carriage. Then came the morning when Mrs. Winters burst into the schoolroom, her face ashen, clutching a copy of the London Gazette. "Explain yourself, Miss Kincade," she demanded, thrusting the paper at Amelia. There, in black and white, was an account of the Duke's accident and his rescue by Miss Amelia Kincade, daughter of the late Nathaniel Kincade, whose unfortunate gambling debts and subsequent suicide caused such a stir in society circles 6 years past. The blood drained from Amelia's face. Her carefully constructed life was crumbling before her eyes. "You deceived us," Mrs. Winters hissed. "We welcomed you into our home, entrusted our children to your care, never knowing you were tainted by such scandal." "I did not deceive you," Amelia replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite her inner turmoil. "You asked for references, which I provided. My father's mistakes are not my own. Nevertheless, your position here is untenable. I cannot have a person of such questionable background influencing my daughters. You will pack your things and be gone by nightfall." The girl's tearful protests fell on deaf ears as Amelia was banished to her room to gather her meager possessions. As she folded her dresses with trembling hands, bitter tears slid down her cheeks. This was precisely why she had guarded her past so carefully, why she had resisted the Duke's attention. Once again, she was paying the price for a sin that was not her own. With nowhere else to turn, Amelia took lodgings at a modest boarding house frequented by governesses between positions. Her savings would sustain her for perhaps 2 months, but without a reference from the Winters family, her prospects for new employment were dim. 3 days into her stay, as she returned from a fruitless inquiry at an employment agency, the landlady informed her that a gentleman caller awaited in the parlour. To her astonishment, the Duke of Valmont rose from his chair as she entered, his expression grave. "Miss Kincade, I have come to offer my most sincere apologies. It seems my secretary made inquiries about your background, and that information found its way to the press." "I never intended." "You investigated me," Amelia interrupted, indignation overwhelming her usual deference. "By what right did you pry into my personal affairs?" The Duke had the grace to look abashed. "It was not done at my directive, though that hardly absolves me. When I learned of your dismissal, I came immediately to make amends." "There are no amends to be made, Your Grace. My reputation, such as it was, is ruined anew. No respectable family will hire me now." "Then let me offer you a position in my household. My young ward, Lady Sarah, is in need of a governess with precisely your qualifications." Amelia stared at him incredulously. "You cannot be serious. After what has happened, to place me in your home would only invite further scandal." "I care little for scandal, Miss Kincade." His voice softened. "Besides, there is something I have not told you about the day of the accident. I was not merely thrown from my horse. Someone tried to kill me." This revelation stunned her. "But why?" "I have enemies, Miss Kincade. People who stand to lose a great deal if certain reforms I support are enacted in Parliament. My aunt and I believe I may require someone I can trust completely. Someone not already aligned with any faction of society. And you think that person is me, a disgraced governess you've met precisely twice. You saved my life at risk to your own, with nothing to gain. In my experience, such selflessness is rare." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "There is also the matter of my dreams." Amelia's breath caught. "Dreams." "For weeks before the attack, I dreamed of falling, and of being saved by a woman with amber eyes. When I opened my eyes in the park and saw you, I knew we were connected by something beyond understanding." The confession resonated with Amelia's own experience so profoundly that she could not speak for several moments. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. "I had a similar dream, the very morning of your accident." Something shifted in the air between them, a recognition of shared mystery. The Duke extended his hand. "Will you trust me, Amelia? Will you come to Valmont House, not merely as my ward's governess, but as someone under my personal protection?" Every instinct for self-preservation urged her to refuse. Yet the alternative, poverty and obscurity, seemed suddenly hollow compared to the purpose he offered. And beneath it all lurked the undeniable pull she felt toward this man who had appeared first in her dreams and then in her reality. "Very well, Your Grace," she said, placing her hand in his. "I will come." Valmont House proved to be both a sanctuary and a labyrinth of new challenges for Amelia. Lady Sarah, a spirited girl of 10 with her uncle's striking blue eyes, quickly formed an attachment to her new governess. The household staff, taking their cue from the Duke's obvious respect for Amelia, treated her with courtesy, if not warmth. But beyond the protective walls of the estate, London society buzzed with speculation. What was the mysterious connection between the powerful Duke of Valmont and the governess with the scandalous heritage? Some whispered of a secret affair, others of blackmail. The truth, that she had saved his life and was now helping protect it, remained known only to a trusted few. As weeks passed, Amelia found herself drawn into the Duke's confidence. Late evenings in the library discussing his political endeavors, afternoons in the garden watching him teach Sarah to ride, moments that created an intimacy more profound than anything physical could have achieved. She learned that beneath his aristocratic exterior, Vincent Xavier was a man of deep conviction. His proposed reforms to improve conditions for factory workers and extend education to the poor had made him enemies among his peers, but heroes among the common people. My father would have been horrified, he confided one evening as they sat before the fire, Sarah having retired for the night. He believed privilege was a right, not a responsibility. We quarrelled bitterly before his death. And yet you chose this path despite the cost, Amelia observed. That takes courage. As does rebuilding one's life after scandal, he replied, his gaze holding hers. Your father's actions were not your own, yet you've borne their consequences with dignity. That's a different kind of courage. In such moments, Amelia felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. But each time she found herself softening toward him, she reminded herself of the insurmountable gulf between their stations. Even if Vincent saw beyond her past, society never would. To dream of anything more than friendship was to invite devastation. One afternoon, as Amelia supervised Sarah's watercolor practice in the conservatory, Lady Harrington joined them, settling herself on a nearby chaise. "My nephew speaks highly of you, Miss Kincade," she remarked, watching as Sarah attempted to capture the likeness of a particularly vibrant orchid. "In fact, I've never seen him so animated as when he discusses your latest debate on literature or politics." Amelia focused on adjusting Sarah's brush technique, hoping to hide the blush that crept into her cheeks. "His Grace is most kind to include me in such discussions." "Kind has nothing to do with it," Lady Harrington replied with a knowing smile. "Vincent has never suffered fools gladly, regardless of their station. He values your mind, my dear, and I suspect perhaps something more." "Lady Harrington, please," Amelia whispered, glancing anxiously at Sarah, who thankfully appeared absorbed in her painting. "Such suggestions are inappropriate and impossible." The older woman's expression grew serious. "Impossible? My dear, the world is changing. Vincent is at the forefront of that change. Do not be so quick to decide what is impossible, especially when it concerns matters of the heart." Before Amelia could formulate a response, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. The Duke's secretary appeared at the door, his face grave. "Miss Kincade, Lady Harrington, His Grace has been called to an emergency session at Westminster. There's been another threat." Lady Harrington rose immediately. "Sarah, darling, continue your painting. Miss Kincade and I must speak with Mr. Hayes privately." In the corridor, the secretary explained that an anonymous note had been delivered, warning the Duke that if he persisted in supporting the factory reform bill, he would not live to see it enacted. "Vincent insisted on attending the debate despite the threat," Hayes said, his frustration evident. "He refuses to be intimidated." "Or to exercise common sense," Lady Harrington muttered. "Miss Kincade, I fear we must impose upon your discretion once again. Vincent values your insight. Would you accompany me to Westminster? Perhaps between us we can convince him to take appropriate precautions." The Houses of Parliament loomed magnificent against the afternoon sky as their carriage approached. Amelia, her heart pounding with both fear for Vincent's safety and trepidation at entering such a bastion of male privilege, followed Lady Harrington through corridors of power where curious glances tracked their progress. They located the Duke in an antechamber, deep in conversation with several other peers. His face registered surprise and concern when he saw them. "Aunt Elizabeth, Miss Kincade, what brings you here?" "Your recklessness," Lady Harrington replied tartly. "Mr. Hayes informed us of the threat. Surely you don't intend to make yourself a target." Vincent drew them aside, his voice low. "I cannot allow these cowards to dictate my actions. The bill comes to a vote today." "Then at least allow your guards to accompany you into the chamber," Amelia urged, forgetting protocol in her concern. "Please, Your Grace." Something in her voice reached him. His expression softened. "Very well, for your peace of mind. But I will not hide while others fight this battle." As they stood in the public gallery watching the debate unfold, Amelia could not help but admire Vincent's eloquence as he argued passionately for the rights of child labourers. This was a man who used his privilege to champion those without voice. How could she not be moved by such nobility of purpose? The vote was called, and to Vincent's visible satisfaction, the bill passed by a narrow margin. As the chamber erupted in a mixture of cheers and disgruntled murmurs, he looked up to the gallery and met Amelia's gaze. The silent communication that passed between them transcended words. Shared triumph, shared purpose, shared feeling. Their carriage had just begun the journey back to Valmont House when a shot rang out, shattering the window beside Lady Harrington. Amelia reacted instinctively, pulling the older woman down as glass exploded inward. The horses panicked, and the carriage lurched violently before the driver regained control and whipped them into a gallop. At Valmont House, chaos reigned as the Duke, who had travelled separately, learned of the attack. Amelia was tending to a minor cut on Lady Harrington's arm when Vincent burst into the drawing room, his face pale with fear. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, rushing to his aunt's side before turning to Amelia, his eyes scanning her for injury. "We are quite well," Lady Harrington assured him, though her voice trembled slightly, thanks to Miss Kincaid's quick reflexes. Vincent's gaze locked with Amelia's. "You keep saving those dear to me. How can I ever repay such a debt?" "There is no debt between friends, Your Grace," Amelia replied softly. "Friends," he repeated, as if testing the word and finding it inadequate. In the days that followed, the household existed in a state of heightened security. Vincent reluctantly agreed to curtail his public appearances while the authorities investigated both attacks. This enforced seclusion meant that he spent more time at home and, inevitably, more time in Amelia's company. They fell into a pattern of evening walks in the private garden, where high walls ensured privacy. Under the gentle glow of early summer twilight, their conversations deepened, venturing into territories of personal history and cherished dreams that neither had shared widely before. "I sometimes wonder what my life would have been if my father had made different choices," Amelia confessed one evening as they paused beside a fountain. "Not that I would wish for wealth or position, but simply the freedom to chart my own course without the shadow of scandal." "And what course would you chart if you were truly free?" Vincent asked, his voice gentle in the gathering dusk. Amelia considered the question. "I would establish a school for girls from difficult circumstances, those who, like me, need education to overcome the accidents of their birth or fortune. I would teach them that their worth is not determined by others' judgments." "A noble ambition," he said, his admiration evident. "You speak of freedom from judgment, yet you judge yourself so harshly. You carry your father's shame as if it were your own." "The world does not differentiate," Amelia replied with a touch of bitterness. "In society's eyes, I am forever tainted by association." "Not in all eyes." Vincent took her hand, an intimacy that sent a tremor through her. "Never in mine." The sincerity in his gaze was her undoing. For one breathless moment, Amelia allowed herself to believe that something impossible might be possible after all. Vincent's face lowered toward hers, and she did not pull away. Their kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more urgent. Amelia felt herself responding with a passion she had never known she possessed. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Reality crashed back upon her with crushing force. "This cannot be," she whispered, stepping away from him. "You are a duke. I am a governess with a ruined name. There is no future in this madness." "Amelia!" "No," she cut him off, tears threatening. "I will not be your momentary folly, Vincent. I respect myself too much, and I care for you too deeply to allow that. Please, let us forget this happened and return to our proper places." Before he could argue, she fled to the safety of the house, her heart breaking with every step. She had allowed herself to dream, and now she must pay the price in renewed pain. The following morning, Amelia penned a letter of resignation. She could not remain at Valmont House, not with the memory of Vincent's kiss burning in her mind, not with the knowledge that she had fallen irrevocably in love with a man forever beyond her reach. She would find another position, perhaps in the countryside, where her notorious name might be less recognized. She was sealing the envelope when a knock came at her door. Lady Harrington entered without waiting for a response, her expression unusually grave. "My dear, I've just had the most disturbing conversation with my nephew. He informs me that you intend to leave us." Amelia straightened her shoulders. "It is for the best, my lady. My position here has become complicated." "Because you love him," Lady Harrington stated simply. There seemed no point in denial. "Yes. And because he deserves someone who will not bring scandal to his name and cause." "How curiously provincial you can be for such an intelligent woman," Lady Harrington remarked, settling herself in a chair. "Vincent has never concerned himself with what others believe he deserves. And as for scandal, my dear, the Xavier family has weathered far worse than marrying a governess of good character, whose only sin was to be born to a flawed father." Amelia stared at her in shock. "Marrying? Surely you cannot think that my nephew wishes to make you his wife? I assure you, he has spoken of little else this past hour. He is quite determined, though he fears your stubborn pride may prove a greater obstacle than any societal disapproval." "It is not pride," Amelia protested, her voice breaking. "It is concern for his standing, his work. Everything he fights for would be undermined if he allied himself with someone like me." "Or perhaps strengthened," Lady Harrington countered. "What better demonstration of his belief in judging people by their character rather than their circumstances? Besides, you have saved his life and mine. Even the most rigid society matrons would be hard-pressed to object in the face of such heroism." Amelia sank onto the edge of her bed, her mind reeling. Could it truly be possible, or was she being led once more into a dream from which she would painfully awaken? "He loves you, Amelia," Lady Harrington said softly, "not despite your past, but including it. Every triumph and tragedy that shaped you into the woman who captured his heart. The question is, are you brave enough to accept that love?" Before Amelia could respond, another knock came, more forceful this time. Vincent entered, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability that made Amelia's heart constrict. Lady Harrington rose with a knowing smile. "I believe my part in this drama is concluded. I shall leave you to continue without my interference." She paused at the door. "Though I do expect a satisfactory resolution, the suspense is quite taxing at my age." When they were alone, Vincent approached Amelia slowly, as one might a startled deer. "You were going to leave without saying goodbye." Amelia clutched the letter of resignation. "I thought it kinder to both of us." "There is nothing kind about denying what exists between us, Amelia." He took the letter gently from her hands and tore it in half. "I love you. I think perhaps I have loved you since I opened my eyes in the park and saw you standing over me like a guardian angel from my dreams." "Vincent, please." "No, hear me now." His voice was firm but tender. "I know what you will say, that we are too different, that society will never accept you, that you would damage my causes. But consider this. The very reforms I champion are founded on the belief that birth and circumstance should not determine one's worth or opportunities. How can I advocate such principles in public while allowing them to be thwarted in my private life?" He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "The night we met, you saved more than my life. You awakened something in me that had slumbered too long, the courage to follow my heart as boldly as I follow my convictions. I do not want a marriage of convenience or alliance. I want you, Amelia Kincade, with your fierce intelligence, your compassionate heart, and yes, even your stubborn pride." Tears blurred Amelia's vision. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple, not easy perhaps, but simple. Do you love me?" The question hung in the air, demanding truth. "Yes," she whispered, surrendering at last to the certainty in her heart. "God help me, I love you beyond reason." Then marry me, be my duchess, my partner, my conscience. Help me build the world we both believe in, one where a person is judged by their character, not their name or their past. Amelia searched his face for any hint of doubt and found only unwavering devotion. The false belief that had governed her life, that she was unworthy of happiness because of her father's sins, began to crumble beneath the weight of Vincent's love. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Yes, I will marry you, Vincent Xavier. Not because you are a duke, but because you are a man who sees me truly." His smile was radiant as he rose and drew her into his arms. "My Amelia, my fate. I think perhaps we have been moving toward this moment since before we met." "In dreams," she murmured against his shoulder. "And now in reality," he finished, lifting her chin for a kiss that sealed their future. 6 months later, Westminster Abbey witnessed the marriage of His Grace, Vincent Xavier, Duke of Valmont, to Miss Amelia Kincade. Society gossips who had predicted disaster were silenced by the evident adoration between bride and groom, and by the quiet dignity with which the new Duchess conducted herself. The investigation into the attempts on Vincent's life had revealed a conspiracy led by a rival peer with substantial investments in factories that would be affected by the reforms. With the perpetrator brought to justice, the Duke and his Duchess embarked on their shared mission to improve the lives of England's most vulnerable citizens. Amelia's School for Disadvantaged Girls opened the following spring on the grounds of the Valmont country estate. There, young women who might otherwise have been condemned to lives of servitude or worse found education, purpose, and the message that their circumstances need not define their futures. On the first anniversary of their meeting in Hyde Park, Vincent presented Amelia with a journal bound in soft leather. "For your dreams," he explained, as she opened it to find the pages blank, except for an inscription on the first leaf. In her husband's elegant hand were written the words, "To my Amelia, who taught me that the most powerful force in this world is not privilege or position, but the courage to believe in possibility. Our greatest dreams found us when we found each other." Amelia closed the journal and looked up at the man who had transformed her life, not by rescuing her, but by recognizing her strength and worth when she had forgotten it herself. "I once thought dreams were dangerous things," she said, reaching for his hand. "Now I know they are maps guiding us home." Vincent drew her close. "And this is our home, my love. Not these walls or titles, but this life we've built together." Outside their window, the first roses of summer bloomed in a garden where once they had walked in twilight, prisoners of doubt and convention. Now they stood in the full light of day, free to love, free to dream, their destinies entwined just as they had glimpsed in those prophetic visions that had brought them together. For Amelia, Duchess of Valmont, formerly a disgraced governess with no prospects, the greatest revelation was not that fate had led her to save a duke's life. It was that in doing so, she had finally found the courage to save her own.